We may have forgotten what the biggest offensive change this offseason actually was.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. And thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining me as he does every Monday, Lindsay Crosby of AuburnDaily.com, as well as a million other places. Lindsay, is the national media finally coming around to these Auburn Tigers? That's coming up, as well as, hey, you know what? It is okay to panic about some things on the recruiting trail, but let's have some context with it. That's coming up as well. But first things first, Lindsay, this weekend was a weekend during the offseason where I miss football a little bit more than I do on a typical day during the offseason. So we all have those weekends, and when that happens, you pull up last year's games and you watch a few of them. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's unusual. And of course, we all knew this. We even alluded to this a little bit last week during some of the Locked On Auburns. But it was just a shocking or resounding reminder of how awful and atrocious the offense was schematically a year ago. And sure, the receivers could have been better. Sure, Thorne could have been more accurate. Sure, they could have just picked one quarterback. But the shift away from Philip Montgomery in and of itself is going to be monumental this offseason or moving into 2024. And then obviously the shift to Hugh Freeze / Derek Nix calling plays. I just think we've kind of moved past that a little bit over, just throughout the conversation this offseason because the transfer portal additions have been so fun and so dynamic. But what they put on the field schematically on offense last year, it was just so comically bad, Lindsay.
It's interesting that that's how you chose to spend your birthday weekend. Zach's birthday was on Sunday, everybody. Wish happy birthday down in the comments below. Philip Montgomery moving on is an upgrade. And then Hugh Freeze taking over play calling, which it'll be a collaborative thing with Philip Nix, but we all expect this to be Hugh Freeze's offense.
Derek Nix, our sweet prince.
Sorry, Derek Nix. That will be a second step up. So you're gaining multiple levels of improvement on offense from that.
Yeah.
And on your kind of impetus here, I went back and looked at some of the games from last year. And I think the biggest thing for me is I forgot on the 2 quarterback system how it wasn't a series to series thing. It wasn't I remember some of the formative years for me is DJ Shockley at the University of Georgia behind Matthew Stafford. And they did a thing where every third series was DJ Shockley's. Stafford had 2, Shockley came in for a series and then went back and that's how they did a 2 quarterback system when they had the bandwidth to do it on the offense. And I just forgot how many of these games you would see Robbie Ashford come in and it would be a pass, an incomplete pass. It would be a rush for 1 yard or 2 yards. And then Peyton Thorne jogs in for 3rd and 8, and everybody knows he's passing the ball. And it just telegraphed everything so badly.
Yeah, they love putting Peyton Thorne in on 2nd and long and 3rd and long. It was just over and over and over again. And you look at some of these, and a lot of these happened at home, which is even more frustrating. Mm-hmm. But how many of these big games at home Auburn was in? And Georgia comes to mind, which wasn't as bad of a game plan as some of the other ones, but Ole Miss, you had a chance in that one. And that was the worst game plan offensively, arguably of the season outside of San Jose State. Or New Mexico State, excuse me. Obviously that was terrible. But the Ole Miss one, they started Robbie wanted to keep the ball. And so it was a loss of a yard. Then you put Peyton in and then, the fans wanted Holden Geriner all season. And then they put Holden in, but he was at receiver and they threw it to him on that trick play that was a joke. I think it was a loss of 5 or 6 yards. It's just stuff like that. You got to think that that's gone. You've got to and in close games, Lindsay, that's a big deal.
It was actually a loss of 9 yards, Zach. Because, the thing
the lateral to Holden
was a loss of 9 yards. Because, the thing you should do when you have two quarterbacks and you're rotating them through, and one guy is kind of a passing quarterback and one guy is seen as a rushing quarterback, although Robbie was insistent he could do everything. The right way to handle that, if you want to do a trick play, is to take the guy who's barely played all season, who is another passing quarterback, and stick him out wide. That's the way to really disguise everything. People.
Oh man,
when Olden Garner goes out wide, everybody's thinking, "Oh man, that dude could do anything. He could run a route. He could take a reverse. He could do a pass." That's the way to disguise it. And Philip Montgomery, my man, maybe let that one go out of the playbook altogether. That was
just
bad.
So much of it was so bad. Like the trip to LSU. I mean, it took Auburn like a quarter and a half to actually get a drive going because they couldn't stay on the field and they didn't know what the plays were. They'd come out of timeouts and like be lost in communication. It was an absolute disaster. And I don't think the talent or the execution on the field was perfect, but we say this all the time. Like, you've got, as a coach, you have to do everything you can to put your players into situations for them to succeed. And it just didn't happen. There were just stretches of games, key stretches of games where the offense, it just wouldn't happen. Now, fortunately, they were able to out-talent some of these folks like Arkansas and Vanderbilt, and I think that's going to be able to happen this year against Cal, against Arkansas, against Vanderbilt. Maybe Kentucky. I'm slanting more and more. I'm in Auburn's favor in that toss-up game in Lexington now. But if you're able to do that and just get a little bit better on offense and you win two of these close games, which I think they will, I mean, it just dramatically changes the output of your season.
So let me ask you this, Zach. If you run back last year's roster completely, every single player, but Hugh Freeze is calling plays instead of
you beat Alabama, and probably Georgia.
Honestly, I think if you take last year and you just beat Alabama, I think a lot of people are happier with it, right?
Everything. I mean, 6-6 and 7-5 feels so different. And then obviously with a big win to catapult you. If it was any of those three, if it was Georgia, Ole Miss, or Alabama, you've got a quality win under your belt. Auburn doesn't have a quality win since they beat Ole Miss, Brian Harson's first year. They haven't beaten a ranked opponent since then. And I think that'll change this year, which is going to be crucial. If not, there's going to be people talking for sure, but I think it'll happen. So yeah, I mean, it changes everything, Lindsay, if Hugh Freeze is calling plays. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. There's just been so much focus on all of the other offensive changes and just watching some of that this weekend. It was just, I had forgotten how bad it was. It was a nice reminder of, okay, Auburn is in a great situation to move forward. So there's a lot of panic amongst the Auburn fan base right now as we look ahead on the recruiting trail. And it's okay to panic, but let's think about a few things. That's coming up in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Lindsay, today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Can you imagine wagering anywhere other than FanDuel Sportsbook, Lindsay?
I wagered on Sunday. You know where it was? FanDuel Sportsbook. Because I couldn't imagine wagering anywhere else.
No. And look, I love sports. I love them so much. I don't want them to stop. That's why you watch your favorite team execute terrible game plans on your birthday weekend just because you miss it so much in the middle of summer. That's just how it is. But FanDuel, all summer, they're hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily, every single day. So there's something new for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. Don't go outside. Go on FanDuel. FanDuel's the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. Lindsay, I mean, if you hop on Twitter and you follow a bunch of Auburn people, or if you jump in one of the message boards on the major sites, there's a lot of people panicking because there's rumors and discussions and all that about so many different targets or commits, looking elsewhere, and Auburn kind of slipping. And the timing of this, of course, doesn't look good because it's right after Hugh Freeze went on vacation a little bit before the dead period started, and Auburn fans are upset. They're upset about it. Would this have happened if he hadn't have gone on vacation? Probably. I think they're totally isolated situations, but you can panic. I don't care what you do, but I do want, let's have some context here. And the first is, it's July 1st when the show goes up. And there's 6 months until folks have to send in their NLI and enroll in the school of their choosing. And we have seen Hugh Freeze and this staff do their best work in December, in those final weeks leading up to early signing day, as well as throughout July. I mean, holding on to Perry Thompson, which happened at Big Cat Weekend last July. Cam Coleman was not yet committed. There's so much time. I'm really not concerned about it. I had a knee-jerk reaction to it last week. I'll admit, several of you called me out. You were correct. But I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay. So all of these folks that are looking elsewhere, I think Hugh Freeze and the staff have so much time and so much resources or access to resources that I don't think we need to be panicking yet.
They also have the track record of nailing this, not just at Auburn, like at Ole Miss too. I think that some of the panic, and I'm going to put myself into the shoes of somebody who I guess doesn't hear about some of the average fan, is knowing how bad recruiting was under Brian Harsin and being a little bit scarred from it, and getting all of this good news. And then seeing all of this momentum and then worrying that somehow we're going to end up back in the place where Brian Harsin left you. And that is not going to happen. The difference in this staff and the previous staff is not just that Hugh Freeze actually thinks about recruiting, because let's be honest. I mean, it's a much bigger priority than it was for Brian Harsin, but it's the fact that not only does he think about it, he lives and breathes recruiting. I remember a story from someone that we both know who was at the athletic department Christmas party last year. I think it's in the football complex. And at one point in time, they're looking around and they didn't see the coach. They're like, where is he? And he had slipped out of the party to go to his office to call recruits. It's July 1st. Let's take a breath. If anything, it's good that some of these other schools are shooting their shot, dropping bags and stuff now, because the secret of NIL is a lot of times with these kids, they're getting some sort of payment to come visit your school all in the fall. Guess what? If the kid's committed to your school, he's going to be visiting a lot. You're going to be paying him a lot. And you know what? It's not the biggest deal in the world if a guy decommits right now and goes somewhere else, because you've still got time to flip them. We saw last year. They're going to flip guys. They're going to do it. Let those other teams shoot their shots now. Let them go ahead and throw out the bags now. Use some of that money now so that we have money when it matters. And that is the week before signing day, the night before signing day. That's when it matters. I'm excited to see how Hugh Freeze responds to all of this, because last week wasn't good. The last 8 to 10 days for Auburn recruiting since Alvin Henderson flipped hasn't been great. And he's aware of it. I'm sure he's having a hard time relaxing on vacation because of it. Just being honest, just knowing the guy and how competitive he is. I think he's going to take some of this personal. And I'm excited to see what he does. And there's plenty of key players that I think Auburn's in position to where if they really wanted to make a move and make a statement, I think they'd have the ability to do so. Once the dead period is up, I'm semi-expecting some of this to happen. If it doesn't, by the time, high school football starts in August, then I think we have a different conversation. But I fully expect this month to be a huge month for Auburn on the recruiting trail, because Hugh Freeze, he's never dropped the ball as an SEC coach on the recruiting trail. He never has. I think your date there you're suggesting of when high school football starts is a good date to remember, because we all learned from Brian Harsin that once the high school season starts, you can't visit any schools. You can't visit other high schools. You can't go out and recruit on a Friday night. We learned that. And so I think it's good to kind of assess where the class is at that point, because You're only allowed to go to a school to visit if your son plays for their football team. So I think
to make sure everybody understands he's being very sarcastic right now.
That's what I learned from Brian Harsin. That is in the book from Brian Harsin on how to recruit. I actually have the book right here. It may look like a bunch of blank pages. I promise you, there's actual lessons in here. Yeah. YouTube exclusive joke there, friends.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I mean, folks, you can panic. I don't care. I just don't think that's a good way to navigate this. I think Auburn's going to be fine. I think Auburn's still in a solid position to be a top 5 class when it's all said and done. Top 8 for sure. We'll see what happens moving forward. And they're going to be in a prime situation in 2026 as well. So all in all, take a deep breath. Talking to myself as well. It's going to be okay. I think Auburn's in a good spot.
Don't get worked up over the whims of a 17-year-old kid in high school.
In June. Get upset with the whims of the 17-year-old high schooler in December. That's when you could panic.
Yeah. Don't worry about what a 17-year-old thinks in June. It is not healthy. It is not good for your mental health. Yep. Don't worry about it. All that matters is how they feel in December. That's it.
Yeah, but seriously, if this month isn't big, I think then we can have the conversation. But I think July is setting up to be I think Auburn's in a strong spot to situate themselves nicely. All right. I think the national media is starting to come around on the Tigers. Let's discuss in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Lindsay, can you imagine buying a part for your car, truck, SUV, your automobile anywhere other than eBay Motors?
I absolutely could not. My Jeep Wrangler only gets parts from eBay Motors because they have that thing where they promise that it will match. Is that what it's called? The promise match?
Yeah, the eBay guaranteed fit.
There you go.
You make your account on ebaymotors.com. You add your car in your My Garage page, and then all the parts pop up. They've got a little check mark to guarantee that they fit, or of course you get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. USA. Lindsay, the national media is starting to come around on these Auburn Tigers. I think we've seen so many, I'll say, lazy takes from national folks, from folks that cover the conference, from fans of opposing teams. Shocker. Saying Auburn's going to go 6-6, 5-7, 7-5 is the ceiling for this Auburn team. When you really sit down, I think you're starting to see more and more national folks sit down and actually look at Auburn's schedule and say, wait, this is different than normal because Auburn doesn't have to play the SEC West plus Georgia this year or any year moving forward because the SEC West is no longer a thing thanks to Oklahoma and Texas coming in and divisions being gone. And when you look at Auburn's schedule and most teams in the former SEC West, Auburn's in a much better spot schedule-wise than they have been since I can remember. And you look at it and you say, okay, that middle chunk of schedule of Oklahoma, at Georgia, and at Missouri, it's tough. But everything else outside of the Iron Bowl is super doable. It's super doable. And you can even put Oklahoma on that list because I think they're a little overrated. I don't know if I'm not ready to pick Auburn to win that game, but I do think they are overrated with their offensive line questions and a new quarterback, and they're coming to Jordan-Hare Stadium, and all the pressure is going to be on them. But you just look at the rest of the schedule, and it's totally manageable. And so you saw Will Backus of CBS Sports predicted Auburn to go 8-4 in an article that he did throughout the conference last week.
Always said CBS knows their stuff.
Yeah, sure. And I just think you're going to see more of that in the coming weeks as more and more kind of preseason predictions come out. I think you're going to see more and more folks look at Auburn's schedule and say, wait a second, 8-4 is totally a realistic option here.
Some of the how the sausage is made on these things sometimes, folks will look at how Auburn did last year. They'll look to see who you have returning, and they'll look at your new schedule, and they'll make a guess, and they'll fire it off. And it's because these people do so many of these, right? They're not digging into the roster like Zach Blackerby is on Locked On Auburn. They're not going into detail about, oh, hey, there's a new play caller, and it's going to be exponentially better. They're not looking at the receivers that you lost versus the receivers you got and the quality of those receivers and saying, hey, we should be able to expect these guys to take a leap. They're not looking at the offensive line as a whole and some of the issues you had last year and were they corrected or not.
Right.
And so it is very easy on a surface level analysis to look at this team and say, they're not going to be that good. They lost to a directional Mexico school last year, right? Then they lost a bunch of receivers. Like, they're not going to be good. It's easy to just look at it and say that. But we know, thanks to Locked On Auburn, Auburn Daily, the writing over there, we know how much better this team got in almost every single respect. And so that's why, one, we've been telling you guys go to FanDuel and hammer the line on FanDuel because they've been wrong, national viewpoint, but also why we're not worried when we see, 6-6 is the ceiling. Brother, let's redefine what a ceiling is because you don't understand a ceiling if you say 6-6. Same thing. If you say the floor is 6-6, let's redefine what a floor is.
I'm with you.
You might think that like the most likely outcome is somewhere between 6-6 or 8-4, whatever. The floor is usually going to be really bad for any team. Okay, let's just understand that the floor is not 6. It's not.
It drives me
6-6.
crazy when people say the ceiling of a team is like 8-4, and it's like, no, that's not true. That's not
the ceiling's a perfect season in a national championship. That's the ceiling.
For a lot of now, is that going to happen?
Teams.
No, but the actual true best case scenario, that does happen. 100%. 100%.
So,
but yeah, I think more and more people are going to look at it and say, okay, well, they'll beat Cal, they'll beat Arkansas, Oklahoma, maybe not. I'm just saying from the national viewpoint.
Yeah.
Georgia, maybe not. Mizzou, maybe not. Kentucky, they'll probably beat Kentucky. Yeah, they'll beat Vandy.
Yeah,
they'll probably they can beat A&M. It's at home. And all
late
of a sudden,
in the year too, when you've had a chance to gel, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So to me, it's just I think you're going to see this take emerge more and more. And I guess we're less than 3 weeks. So we're less than 3 weeks away from SEC Media Days, and I can't wait to talk to other folks, throughout the SEC media about this because I think there's going to be several folks that kind of look at it and say, yeah, Auburn could be sneaky all of a sudden. Yeah, Auburn could be this team that has the chance to go 9-3 if they are able to beat either a Missouri or an Oklahoma or a Texas A&M. If you win 2 out of those 3 games, you've got a legitimate shot. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to come in the form of how the media votes for the SEC standings. I think Auburn's going to get pummeled on that because they don't make you actually like fill out a schedule. They just like tell you to list those teams. But I do think like when folks actually sit down and have an intelligent conversation and don't just like say stuff, I think the trend of media outside of Auburn is going to start to point out Auburn going on an 8-4 run is totally realistic.
Yeah. The difference here is if you have to give any sort of snap reaction without any sort of analysis or actually explain with the games they're going to win and lose, it's easy to say Auburn's going to go 6-6. But when you actually sit down and look at the schedule, look at the talent, that's where you start to say, oh no, this is a pretty favorable schedule because most of your super hard games like Alabama, like Georgia, that you were going to struggle to win anyway, are on the road. And a lot of your games at home are pretty winnable. I mean, that's the difference here. If somebody says Auburn's going to go 6-6, say, okay, which 6 are they going to lose? And see if they could even tell you who Auburn's playing.
So
that's the trick here.
Before I hopped on to record with you, I went on with Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On College Football, and you'll be able to hear this conversation on the second Locked On Auburn that drops this afternoon.
Giving the people what they want, Zach.
Yeah, two shows every day. You're welcome in the off season of all times.
Go.
But yeah, we talked about this. It's like I'm seeing so many people say Auburn's going to go 6-6. I'm like, Spencer, show me the 6 losses, and he's like, I can't. And he's like, it could happen, we're talking worst case scenario. If that were to happen. So to me, like Auburn, I don't know if Auburn on paper is 2 wins better than they were a year ago. They probably are. That's a lot. 2 wins in a season is a lot.
Yeah.
But just as far as how the schedule is going to fall, I think it's going to happen, Lindsay.
Yeah, it's something where, again, can you quickly glance at the roster and say you see 2 wins on here? No. But can you look at all of the incremental improvements? If you sit down and dive into the situation, can you find all the incremental improvements and see how they could easily add up? The point you made I think in the first segment when I asked about Hugh Freeze calling plays last year, you probably beat both Alabama and Georgia, or it's a lot closer than a 1-score game if Hugh Freeze is calling plays. And so can you find the little small differences, improvements from last year to this year? If you sit down and dive into it, I think you can. And I think more national media is going to start doing that too.
Yeah, the wins that you almost got last year at home against Alabama and Georgia. I mean, your home games like that this year are A&M and Oklahoma. And
I'd rather face those two than Alabama and Georgia. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you play like you did compared to your competition a year ago to this year, you win both of those games.
Yeah.
And it comes down to what you do in Athens, Tuscaloosa, and Columbia. And if you somehow win in Columbia, which is not out of the question, Mizzou has plenty of questions about that team.
So many questions.
Yeah, sky's the limit. I mean, you're really looking at it. What if Auburn was 9-1 going into the Iron Bowl? I mean, I'm not picking that to happen, but there is a path. I mean, you talk about ceiling, like that's what the ceiling I think looks like.
Well, it'd be wild if they were 9-1 because they would have played 11 games by then. That'd have been so wild.
Whoops. Sorry, Vandy. I guess I should count you. JK.
9-2, 10-1 going into Alabama. I mean, that game is probably nationally televised as part of it's a flex call right now. That's probably nationally televised. If Auburn's a double-digit win team, especially if Alabama's not.
Yep.
Imagine if Alabama's 9-2 for that game.
There's so many people that think they will be, and I'm just not buying it. I'm not buying this major drop off yet that people are.
It's going to happen. I think. I don't know. Like you, I don't know if we'll see it.
I think
this
it
season.
Like 4 years. They're so set up. Right.
I'm about to say simply because, at one point in time, they had a 2 deep of all 5 stars. It takes a while for those guys to graduate, and for the guys you replace them with to not be as good, and the coaching to not be as thorough. And
I know people are quick to say they lost so many guys. I'm like, I just don't. I mean, their roster.
They had so many guys beforehand.
You just look at their roster; it's still just so good. I don't know. We'll see. Not what we're talking about, but regardless, yeah. So we'll see. Hey, we got 2 Locked On Auburns every day, so be sure to come back this afternoon to check that out. Lindsay, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can find all of the writing. BravesToday.com, Atlanta Braves. We've got Auburn Tigers at Auburn Daily, and all across the Athlon Sports Network.
Yes, be sure to check us out there. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.